What's up, everybody? It is that time of the week again. Feels like we just left y'all, but we're right back at you with another jam-packed episode tonight of the Two Bucks Sports Podcast. Drew, it's not quite the same doing it back over Skype again. I really enjoyed our episode together last week.
Yeah, man, that was an absolute blast. I hope everybody else enjoyed it as much as we did. We bookended the podcast with two separate runs to the tap room and caught the end of the Boston Celtics and Miami Heat Game 6 game that ended in a buzzer beater. We'll get to all that in just a second. But yes, Rusty, did you make it back to South Carolina without any hitches?
No, I did not. So flying, man, you never can tell what's going to happen. But flew back American. When I left Memphis, we had a little bit of mechanical issue, delayed us by about 15, 20 minutes. We got there in plenty of time. My next flight left at 5:40. We landed, or 6:40, and we landed at like 5:50. I got off the plane at 6:09, and I had to just go two gates down. So I get on my plane at 6:40. We're supposed to take off. We board at 6:40. No big deal. We push back from the gate, and we sit there for 20 minutes before the captain comes over and says, we have a slight mechanical issue. A mechanic is on his way. We'll get it cleared, and then we'll take off. 20, 30 minutes later, he comes back and says, well, we actually have to go to the mechanic, so we're going to drive around the airport and meet him over there. So we drive around the airport. Mechanic 1 gets on, works on it for about 20, 30 minutes. Mechanic 2 gets on there and works on it for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then they make the call that we have to change planes. So I was supposed to fly out of Charlotte at 6:40, land at Myrtle Beach at 7:36. Plenty of time to get home and watch Game 7 in the comforts of my condo here in Merrill's Inlet. I didn't take off from Charlotte until 9:30 and then get home until 10:30.
Yeah, well, I mean that's just flying for you, right? I know my mom and dad took a 9-hour flight out of Chicago yesterday, and landed in Barcelona, Spain last night at 9:30.
So jealous.
And it seems like they had less trouble than you did trying to get from, what did you say, Charlotte to Myrtle Beach? So
Yeah, which is like a 40-minute flight. I mean, it's not bad at all.
So when we were in the band, we were flown to a couple different concerts in Charlotte, and so that was no problem getting to Charlotte. But then a couple times we flew to Raleigh, and for the plane tickets they booked us, there was a connecting flight in Charlotte, and you're talking about up in the air and back right down. There's no straight line flight when you're just going from Charlotte to Raleigh. So.
Yeah, and that's how it is from Myrtle Beach to Charlotte. I mean, it's a pretty straight flight. It really shouldn't take that long unless you sit on the tarmac for 2 hours like I did. So shout out to American Airlines. They did finally get me home. I didn't have any trouble flying Delta over there. So looks like I'll be sticking to Delta going forward. But glad to be back. Glad to be back home, back on the podcast with you tonight, sir.
Yeah, I am glad to be back. It feels like you said we recorded Saturday night and it's Wednesday and it snuck up on me. You know, it's like a short weekend, you know, from work. And so you have a lot of fun, and then somehow Friday sneaks up on you again. So we are getting ready. We have got the car loaded down. We're leaving out first thing in the morning. The Gann family is going to take Destin, Florida by storm for a long weekend trip, family vacation. And so as soon as we close this up, Daddy's going to go shower, get into bed, and get ready to go first thing in the morning.
What time are y'all trying to get on the road in the morning?
Well, we're going to get on the road at 8, but the first of the month requires a lot of engineering duties. And so I'm going to get up early and try to knock all of those out by 8 o'clock. And so it may be an early morning for me, but not as early for everybody else in my household.
There you go. Well, nice, man. Well, first of all, before we dive into too many sports topics tonight, I owe you a congratulations and a toast, sir.
Oh, yeah?
Our latest episode over the past weekend got us over 1,000 downloads. So
hey!
Cheers.
And cheers. Is that 1,000 in 1 week or 1,000 total?
1,000 total.
Oh, man. I'll tell you what, because if you told me that was one that blew up, I'd believe it.
Yeah. No, we that one actually has done really well, but we've officially at all time almost 1,050 downloads of our podcast. Two little guys from North Mississippi. Well, one not so little from North Mississippi, and having a great time doing a little podcast. We officially hit the 1,000 download threshold. So any of you out there with a business or something that wants to be downloaded or advertised on a 1,000 download podcast, we are your guys.
Don't ask how many downloads it is, but
Yeah,
we've made it.
we've made it.
So, yeah, congratulations, Rusty. We would not keep doing this if it weren't fun.
Yeah.
So we don't do it for the listeners. We don't do it for advertisers. We genuinely enjoy it. You know that they say, if you love what you do, you'll work for free. You know, that's where we're at with this.
Here we are.
but I do have mouths to feed, and we could provide you a service as well. So
absolutely,
come on board. No free ads here, and so, but they are very cheap. So
absolutely, very cheap. So. But let's keep the good news rolling. Did you see the news about Liam Hendriks, the professional baseball pitcher for the Chicago White Sox this week?
So I knew that he was getting called up. Backstory for everybody: Liam Hendriks, was it 2 years ago or last year? Was
5 months ago.
5 months ago. Okay, so in this offseason was diagnosed with cancer, and took time off to battle cancer, and he made his triumphant return this week. And I tell you what, that's the kind of story that makes sports special. Mm-hmm. You know, sports about bonds with families, and that's what it is for me. But that's the kind of thing you don't get anywhere else, is those huge returns, those big life moments that are able to get shared with the whole world.
And not just any cancer. It was stage 4 and pretty dire diagnosis that he received just 5 months ago, and is now back on the bump, pitching for the White Sox. Pitched last night. Just a really cool story, as you said, Drew. Just one of those that you don't get to see all that often, unfortunately, but sports is a great avenue for that. It's a great opportunity to celebrate these kind of wins and the triumph of the human spirit. And shout out Liam Hendriks. Man, I'm just glad to see him back on the mound, pitching, doing what he does best, and being healthy more than anything. So hopefully those cancer-free diagnoses keep rolling in. He'll stay in remission and has a long career ahead of him. So congratulations, White Sox fans, and most importantly, Liam Hendriks.
Yeah, and today Lance Lynn pitched for the White Sox and gave up a 486-foot home run to Shohei Ohtani.
Tomahawk missile.
My goodness. So, yeah, that is awesome. You know,
and if you haven't seen it, look it up on Twitter. There are some, like, the light show and the ovation that he received last night was, I mean, it'll give you chills watching. It's just so cool. We'll put it on our 2 Buck Sports Podcast Twitter feed so you can see it. it is a sight to behold. So good news all around for the start of the podcast.
Yeah, love to start the podcast off with good news rather than John Morant.
Yeah, we've had to start for the last couple of weeks. But speaking of NBA movement, before we dive into the epic Eastern Conference Finals that we ended up having, more news out of the NBA. If you're a 76ers fan, it's probably some good news for you, but they have found their new head coach to replace Doc Rivers. They picked up one, not to be confused with Nick Nolte, the one Nick Nurse, former coach of the Toronto Raptors, is now a Philadelphia 76er.
Yeah, who would have thought Nick Nolte would have come out of nowhere and usurped the job in Philadelphia from Nick Nurse? Yeah, I mean, I told you last week or 2 weeks ago when we were talking NBA head coach vacancies that this could just be a big musical chairs where everybody trades coaches. And to me, in my opinion, Nick Nurse was number one. Yeah. Now, I've seen where the 76ers have, haters of the 76ers have got their jokes off this week saying that, Joel Embiid's knees would be like barbecue chicken after Nick Nurse plays him for 44 minutes a night.
Yeah.
And that's something that, with a superstar like Joel Embiid, who has the reputation for being fragile, although an argument could be made that that's unwarranted at that point after several seasons of being healthy. He's going to take it easy on Joel. Joel's going to set his own pace here. That's how it works with superstar players. A superstar player that Nick Nurse has not had since Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a huge hire. Another rumbling. You got something else to say on that? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you say it on this podcast all the time. We've talked about it a lot. Don't overthink it. Just make the smart hire. And the Sixers did not overthink it. They picked the right man. They picked the most sensible one of the group that was free, looking for a job. I think it's a home run hire. Like you said, pairing him with Joel Embiid. Drew, we can talk more about this as we get into the conference finals, but it's, begs the question, will Joel Embiid fall into some of the Jimmy Butler type roles as they go through the season, do just enough to be in the playoff hunt and then turn it on come playoff time. But they didn't overthink it. And they made the right hire.
Yeah. And, if you look at the difference in between the past coach and the now current coach and Nick Nurse, the difference between him and Doc Rivers is night and day when it comes to playoff experience and playoff record. Now, I know Doc Rivers was named to the top 15 NBA coaches of all time, but his playoff record outside of one title run in Boston with
that you and the
first big three ever created.
You and I could have taken that team to the finals.
Yeah. Outside of that, he has blown every single series lead he's ever had. You don't trust him. And you've got Nick Nurse, who is widely known as one of the best XO coaches in the game. And so the next for the Sixers, what you look for is what James Harden does. If he's going to opt out of like $40 or $50 million in this contract, just go to, possibly Houston, which would just be the most brain dead decision of all time. But what do you expect? It's James Harden.
Yeah.
And so that's what you're looking for next as the 76ers. Did you see where the Detroit Pistons may have hired a coach?
No.
So the Detroit Pistons are in advanced talks with Monty Williams, the former coach of the Phoenix Suns, which, in my opinion, is a match made in heaven.
Yep.
Monty Williams is a player's coach. He is a program builder. If he's got one knack on his resume, one question, one flaw, it's can he get a really good team to be great? But make no bones about it. Monty Williams, as a developer of talent and as a team builder, there may not be any better in the NBA, and he is such a player-friendly coach. And so when you've got young guys like Cade Cunningham and Jaden
Ivey and
the
James
big
Wiseman, these guys that are there now.
Yeah, the big guy from Memphis, the blanking on his name. But you've got young talent.
James Wiseman.
No, the other one, the one same draft class. Same recruiting class rather.
Marvin Bagley.
Oh, he's there too, but no.
Killian Hayes.
No, he's there too. What's his name?
Jalen Duren.
Yeah, Jalen Duren. So you've got all of those big guys there and all those young guys to build around. The only shame of it for Detroit, and the reason why they probably weren't the first in line to get the head coach they want, is that they had the best odds, tied for the best odds, the worst record in the NBA, and they slipped down to the 5th pick in the draft. Yeah. So that's the only negative. If you could have added Wemby or Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller to that, my goodness, you would have had any coach you wanted,
Yeah, but like you said, man, from a player coach perspective, like Monty Williams is going to thrive there. There's some serious talent on that Detroit team, but none of those guys are 22, 23 years old. They're like the Grizzlies, just a little bit behind because they've bet on player development, they've bet on young talent, and they've got a cupboard full, like we talked about, Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham, Killian Hayes, Jalen Duren, James Wiseman, Marvin Bagley, Bogdanovich. They got some guys who can play. They're just young and inexperienced, and a coach like Monty Williams could make them start taking that next step.
Yep. And then the Milwaukee Bucks hired the Toronto Raptors lead assistant, and Adrian Griffin, who, he's always been kind of that next guy. If you wanted the first-time head coach, everybody loves going to that Budenholzer tree.
Yep.
That's where Taylor Jenkins came from. That's where Kenny Atkinson came from. All those guys came, and even the Lakers coach. Darvin Ham. Yeah, they all came from that Budenholzer tree, and so Adrian Griffin was the next in line. So they hired him in Toronto, where he will go and get all of his paycheck taxed like crazy.
In Canada.
I'm sorry. He left Canada and went to Milwaukee, so he'll make a lot more money.
Yeah, there you
So,
go. And
yeah.
Drew, this is a testament to having this conversation. Just like you look at the two teams in the NBA Finals, and Eric Spoelstra's been there forever. What, 15 years now?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like
He
forever.
was there before LeBron went on the
Absolutely. So he's
that
been
was
there almost
2011, I think.
probably pushing 20 years at this point through his development from a lowly staff position to the head coach. Mike Malone has been in Denver now pushing 10 years. And so it goes to show, like, if you get the right coach in the right situation and you just let them do their thing, trusting that process, developing the talent, getting the pieces that fit with that coach, don't be so quick to pull the trigger. Give them a chance to get in, get their system set in, trust that process. And not every coach is a Mike Malone and Eric Spoelstra, who are doing phenomenal jobs with their teams. But these guys have one of some of the longest tenured coaches in the NBA, and they're playing for the conference, for the NBA title, starting tomorrow night.
So, quick trivia question. You brought up head coach's tenure in the NBA. Where would you suspect that Taylor Jenkins is when it comes to the longest tenured coach in the NBA?
I would say probably, based on the leading of the question, I want to say pretty high.
Now, give me a number.
Top 7.
Yes, top 7. He is 5th in the NBA.
I almost said top 5. She went with my gut.
As of this article that was written, I'm looking at Greg Popovich. He's been there since 1996. Yeah, so he's been there longer than my sister has been alive.
I was in middle school in 1996.
Yeah. Eric Spoelstra, April of 2008. So he's been there 15 years.
Yeah.
Steve Kerr in 14. Michael Malone in 15 with the Nuggets. And then, as of this, it was Budenholzer, Dwayne Casey, Nick Nurse. 2 of those are champions. Mm-hmm. One of them won a Coach of the Year at Portland before he was fired the same year.
Yeah.
Monty Williams, voted Coach of the Year. All of them are gone. And then Taylor Jenkins. Next, which is crazy to me, JB Bickerstaff.
Really? Former Grizz head man, yeah.
Former Grizzlies coach who has been the coach for the Cavaliers since 2020. So 3 years is the 6th most tenured NBA coach in the league.
He came in as an interim job in Memphis and won it after a line and just did such a great job. I will always be a JB Bickerstaff fan. I'm glad he's doing well and got the Cavs in a good position, man. They had a great year this year. They made a,
they flubbed it up late, Yeah. But in a 4-5 matchup, it's hard to call the 5 seed winning an upset.
I mean, it is that, like I said, they're a few bounces away from advancing in the playoffs. So, he's got a certified superstar in Donovan Mitchell, some young talent around him. Good old JB, man. That's cool.
So, so that's what I've got the NBA. The jobs are still open. Phoenix is still open. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Who else is open? I guess that's it. Is that it?
Yeah, that's all I can think of. Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess Brooklyn's going to stick with Jock Vaughn.
Yeah, if he was going to get fired, it would have happened by now.
Right. So, that's it. So,
I'm curious, though, what are your thoughts on, we've had all these head coaching vacancies. Now the Warriors are without a GM.
That's interesting.
That's what I thought.
To set this up, so Bob Myers built this whole thing. And so Bob Myers deserves a ton of credit for building this dynasty, and call it what it is. 4 titles in 8 years. That's a dynasty. And he's walking away. And the timing to me seems awfully like he saved himself a lot of heartache by walking away. He didn't want to do this again, because what he's running into this offseason is deciding on whether or not to pay Draymond Green, one of the big 3 and by far the most vocal.
Yep.
The NBA, in their new collective bargaining agreement, set a second tier for overspending on the cap. And they are well within that second tier, which means you start vacating second round picks. You're not allowed to sign. You're not allowed to sign anybody off of waivers.
It's a heavy penalty.
I mean, it is a big penalty. And for him, he's got 4 rings. He's got all the credit in the world. And I don't blame anybody at all for, once you've accomplished everything that you can accomplish in this game, if you want to walk away and enjoy the spoils of, and not be remembered for what could be a very poor time in Warriors basketball after, you lose Draymond and Steph gets old and Clay gets older.
Jordan Poole's likely gone. I mean, there's a lot going on there. And don't forget, Draymond was recently voted the most punchable face in all of professional sports by an illustrious podcast.
Yeah, I think that Bob Myers is a listener, and so he was like, I can't pay him, and I don't want to have to tell him to his face, so I'll just quit.
That makes sense. He's a long-time listener out there. It makes sense.
So Bob Myers, good job. Get lost, and maybe the Warriors will start to suck.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of changes going to happen in there. I don't know that they're necessarily in blow-up mode because Steph and Clay still have some life in their legs, but I don't know that Draymond and or Jordan Poole or Warriors next year. It'll be interesting to see what they can piece together and who they hire in that GM role to kind of guide them into the future, right? Because this hire is going to be important for whether or not they continue on their trajectory or, like you said, they start vying for lottery picks.
Well, and as well as I do, when you start hiring new GMs, they want to do things their way. And if a new GM comes in and he looks at the bankroll and he sees, your third best player in Andrew Wiggins is making $30 million a year and Draymond's wanting a max salary and you're already paying a bum like Jordan Poole $30 million a year, they're going to want to strip that sucker down for parts.
Yep.
And as long as they've got Steph Curry and they've got Klay Thompson on their team, they're going to be competitive. And so what do you try? Do you try to extend their window and crater even harder at the end? Or do you try to be competitive as much as you can while saving money and live in the limbo there? And, hopefully you catch fire like the Miami Heat have.
Yeah.
In the postseason.
With a bunch of role players. Because, you got guys like Dante DiVincenzo, who's not that expensive. You got some role players that are there. Can you continue to win and build with those guys? Right.
And you can, but you've got so much money wrapped up into 4 players.
Yeah.
That's the problem you're going to get, and the problem that the Grizzlies are going to find. Desmond Bane's up for an extension, and they're going to offer it to him, and he's going to sign for whatever money he's available. Yep. And you've got Ja on a max deal, and you've got Jaren on a 5-year deal that is very team friendly.
But it's still a heavy hit. Still 20 plus million a year.
Yeah, but you compare that to when you had all 3 of those guys on rookie contracts, and it afforded you a deep bench. It afforded you to pay Tyus Jones starting point guard money to be your backup. That's the reality that the Grizzlies are going to look at going forward, is trying to figure out how to effectively build a bench, and it's something that the Warriors have done so well.
Yeah.
That's what Bob Myers deserves probably the most credit for. Anybody knows that anybody can make the decision to pay Steph and Dre and Clay and all those guys. But what he has done so well is he's gotten role players like Livingston, Iggy, and, deep, like you said, DiVincenzo and Kayvon Looney. Like, you go for days on role players that have come up huge for them in crunch time.
And it helps that you're winning. When you're winning, guys will take a pay cut to come play with you for sure and take better salaries when you're winning games at a tick like the Warriors were. And the Celtics are fixed to figure that out too, because they're potentially going to have, $600 million tied up in 2 players. Both Jaylen Brown, who struggled towards the end of the Eastern Conference Finals, and Jason Tatum are going to command max and super max deals because of making All NBA again. Jaylen Brown is due this summer, Jason Tatum next. And so Boston's going to have to figure that out. Brad Stevens, your work is cut out for you.
Yeah, and that's a job he asked for. He stepped into that role and off the court. And so let's just go ahead and get into that. So as we finished our podcast on Saturday night, the Celtics and the Miami Heat were in Game 6, and we watched the end of it in the tap room here in Ripley, Mississippi.
And we finished it in your driveway on the iPad.
Yeah, and home. So with about 2 minutes to go, I just live right around the corner, so we blitzed out of there to try to catch the end of it at the house. Ended up catching the end of it on my iPad in the driveway, just in time to see Marcus Smart catch the inbound pass and heave it towards the goal.
With a great look.
It carrying Kareem just perfectly so that Derek White could catch it at the rim off the backboard with 0.3 seconds to go to win it in just an absolute stunner. I mean, I saw clips of Heat fans celebrating because they threw their phone down as soon as they saw the ball go off the rim, like just an absolute gut punch.
Yeah.
For a fan base, and we've seen those as Grizzlies fans. We've been punched in the gut before. The first one that comes to mind is that Chris Paul shot in Game 2 against the Clippers, where he ripped our hearts out right in front of us at the buzzer, and that was what everybody thought was the end of the Heat. Well, nobody had ever come back from 3-0 down before, and here the Celtics, who are the better team, or allegedly the better team based on regular season record and based on superstar talent. Here they are. They've forced a Game 7, and they're playing it at home.
And real quick before we move to Game 7, I'm sure you saw this, but there was a little bit of controversy at the end of that game because Jimmy Butler was fouled by Al Horford over in the corner, and the foul was initiated with about 2.7 roughly seconds left on the clock, but they stopped it at 2.1. And Jimmy Butler, with ice water in his veins, just calmly walks up there and knocks down the 3 biggest free throw shot in the NBA this year.
Not only that, they called it a 2-point shot.
Yeah.
And Boston challenged the foul. Yeah. And they ruled that it was a foul. Oh, and his feet were behind the 3-point line. So instead of 2 shots, you're getting 3 shots.
That he calmly knocked all 3 down. But in that review process, though, every replay I've seen, the foul, Al Horford makes contact around 2.7 seconds. They dropped it. It was at 2.1. But in the course of those free throws, all of a sudden, Boston had 3 seconds left. And that 0.9 seconds was the difference in Derek White being able to get that rebound off. I'm not here to talk conspiracy theories, but it felt like that extra 0.3 seconds from 2.7 to 3 was a gift to the Celtics that they maximized and were able to make that layup.
Well, the time definitely made a factor, but I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, in the review process they added that time back.
Yeah, that's what they reviewed it and determined it was supposed to be 3 seconds.
Because it's not the clock operator in the arena is listening for the whistle, but when they review it, they don't listen for the whistle. They look for contact, and naturally, there's a delay between you see the foul and you blow the whistle. So that's where the time came in.
Right. And in the replays that I have seen on social media, it looks like the foul is initiated around 2.7. The referee saw it at 3. Matters not. I'm a happy camper because then I got to watch Game 7 sitting on an airplane on the Charlotte tarmac.
Yeah. And Game 7 was about as exciting as a root canal. You came out first possession. You're playing at home in Boston. This is the team. They're drawing parallels between the 2005 Yankees and Boston Red Sox baseball series where the Red Sox came back from 3-0 down and the energy is in the building. And from the jump, first possession, Jason Tatum rolls his ankle and he is not the same player the rest of the game. It was really a shame for basketball. But if you watch the way Miami dominated that game, I'm not sure that it would have mattered that much.
No, and we had a Tim Tebow moment where Duncan Robinson later came out and said that the Boston fans obtained his cell phone number and were blowing him up after Game 6. So he hits that big 3 late and gives him the ear cup as he goes down the court. Jimmy Butler did Jimmy Butler things. And shout out Craig Martin, man, like get an opportunity to play for the Heat.
Cody.
Same thing. Playing for the Heat deep in the playoff run against a team that let him go. He was cut from Charlotte, picked up by the Heat, and then was in the Eastern Conference Finals MVP conversation after a phenomenal series. The Heat, like we talked about earlier, like they're doing it without Tyler Hero. They're doing it with Kevin Love, the thickest point guard in the league, and Kyrie and Kyle Lowry, former Memphis Grizzly, like doing it with a bunch of role players like we talked about earlier, and just went to Boston and straight up took their lunch money, punched him in the mouth from the jump. Jason Tatum getting hurt didn't help, but that Miami was not going to lose that basketball game.
Yeah, and I believe I said it on the podcast. If not, I said it to you off the podcast. I said that the best possible, the most funny scenario of all time is that the Heat blow a 3-0 lead, but then dominate Game 7 in Boston, where their fans, Boston fans are about the worst in the world. It's like Tennessee Vols, Arkansas baseball, and Boston, just as a whole.
Shout out to our Boston listeners. I got a lot of buddies from that golf trip that listen to this podcast. We love you, but it's true.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it was great. It worked out exactly how I wanted it to.
I
told you I wanted the teams that cared about. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, it did not work out for that series, but I'm all the way in on Denver to win this because they cared. Yeah.
Yeah, and I honestly, like, we'll make projections, I'm sure, and I'm sure to be wrong, but I think Denver wins in 6 at the most, if not 5. Denver's just a better team, talent-wise. We get into projections here in a minute, but I want to know what video Eric Spoelstra showed them before Game 7, because Bam brought it up in the trophy presentation, and he tried to hand the Western Conference or the Eastern Conference champion trophy to Jimmy Butler, and he said, "Nah, I'll hold the next one," which I thought was pretty cool. But then they asked Bam, what did Coach Spo, what did he say to get y'all motivated? He said, well, he showed us this video in the locker room, and Spo looks at him with this look of, don't you say it. And so I'm curious what video was shown.
Nah, I have no idea.
I don't either, but
maybe
it was just
the clip of the Miracle on Ice. I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe Rocky IV, when Rocky knocks out Ivan Drago.
Yeah. I don't know. It was
something from Wolf of Wall Street.
It was a great clip. It was just a great moment.
Don't you give our secrets.
Yeah, but I think it's going to set up. I think it'll be a fun finals. There's some heat going back a couple years ago when Jokic took out Bam at the top of the key after a hard foul, and Jimmy Butler told him to bring it to the parking lot. And it was Markieff Morris. That's Markieff Morris.
And that was an absolute cheap shot from Jokic. Mm-hmm. One that 100%. He never seems to be bothered by much, and he just absolutely drilled Markieff Morris. And then Morris decided that he was just done for the year. He didn't play any the rest of the year because of back pain after that.
Yeah, and couldn't have happened to a better guy. Markieff and his twin brother are just goons, is all they are. Yeah. But yeah, there's some bad blood there with Jimmy and Jokic. I think Jimmy Butler is coming in hot after a Game 7. I reached out to Cold Takes Exposed because you lovingly liked my tweet. I mean when they announced,
you noticed when I did that too.
I thought based on the referees that were assigned to that game, Boston was.
It could not have been a worse trio of referees between John Goble and Scott Foster and
Tony Brothers
to referee a Game 7 Eastern Conference Finals game. I mean that was just awful.
I saw a tweet where Boston, with that combination, Boston was like 16-0, and that was the tweet that I put on, like, all right, Denver, go ahead and chart your flight.
Yeah. But yeah, that was a landslide in game.
The referees weren't going to help. I mean, I think that the beatdown that Miami issued Boston, there was not a single referee that was going to help. And at some point, Adam Silver told them, like, look, guys, just call the game. There's not much we can do.
Leave no doubt. That's what Spoelstra told everybody. Leave no doubt. So.
Yeah.
And, so you've got Nuggets in 6?
I think Nuggets in 6. I think the Heat will win 1, maybe 2. If you press me, Nuggets in 6. I could see them doing it in 5, but I'll say Nuggets in 6.
Yeah, I lean Nuggets. Rest can kind of help you or hurt you when you've got 9 days of rest.
Right.
If it were any other team that did not play in the altitude of Denver, I may think that Miami would actually win Game 1 in Denver, just because of rustiness and elevation change and rustiness. But I think I'm so hesitant to rule against this Miami team.
Sure, feels like destiny.
It does, but I feel like it's Jokic's destiny anyways. Mm-hmm. He's ready to make that Giannis. Giannis won the 2 MVPs, and it was like, okay, well, now all he's got to do is win a title, and when is he going to do it? And then he did it, and it was his year. I feel like this is Jokic's year. I would go Denver in 7, with a little back and forth. However, I would be more likely to say Denver in 6 than Miami in 7. That makes sense?
It does. Yeah, I agree. I just don't think they have an answer for Jokic. I just don't know that
nobody does.
Bam or Kevin Love or definitely Udonis Haslem. Like, nobody's going to slow him down. And then if Jamal Murray continues, because it's one thing if Jokic, who, if I'm not mistaken, passed Wilt Chamberlain for like most triple doubles in the playoffs, but like if you're it's one thing if he's getting his numbers, that's going to happen. But when he's getting a triple-double and Jamal Murray's scoring 30 and a half and Aaron Gordon's giving you 21, like there's not many teams on this planet that's going to beat them right now.
Right. And not enough attention is being paid to Jamal Murray for after that Western Conference Finals series.
Absolutely.
He was absolutely incredible. Bubble
Absolutely.
Murray is back. And the only reason why he's not getting more credit is because Jokic has just been that much better.
So good.
And so it's going to be a fun series because the styles make fights. And if there's anybody that can guard Jokic, I would prefer it to be somebody like Bam, who is a little smaller, more athletic, more versatile big, rather than somebody, like, who
Anthony
Robert
Davis,
Williams, like I was
Al
thinking
Horford.
out of the East,
Yeah.
Al Horford or, somebody who's a little bit more, heavy footed. Bam, I think Bam can do it a little better, but nobody's going to do it well enough.
No, and he's still going to get his triple doubles. He's still going to get his 30 piece, and it's going to be tough for Miami to overcome that. If the Nuggets are playing like that complete team that they are, there's nobody that's going to stop them. They could win this thing in 5, but I look for Miami to win at least one, if not maybe both games at home. Those first 2 games at home. And then Denver holds home court so well. The altitude, they play well at home. That place gets loud. And, it's their first trip to the NBA Finals, and they're going to host it in Denver. Like, go ahead. Yeah. It's going to be packed, man. It's going to be cool.
The last thing I'll say about it is that Denver was the 1 seed in the West. They're playing a 8 seed out of the East, and they're still somehow able to play that nobody believes in us card. Yeah. And nobody is championing that cause more than the coach. And right. he is, stepping in front of his team. He's being the shield for his team, and he's the one that's being vocal about it. Like, nobody believes in us, and to his credit, he said it after game 1 against LA, where everybody's talking about how, they made an adjustment to guard Jokic and they may have found something. Well, we won that game and we're going to win the next one. And he backed it up and they swept them. And so they've got a swagger about them that can probably only be matched by Jimmy Butler. But I'm going Jokic. I'm going Murray. I'm going Nuggets in 7.
So. Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about it is just another testament to, again, like I said earlier about trusting the process with the coaches. It's the same with the teams. Neither of these teams have gone out and signed these massive superstars.
Heat culture, baby.
Heat culture is a real thing. They've been to the finals more than any other team since the year 2000. It's a real thing. Pat Riley has done a phenomenal job as the GM, president of basketball operations down there. Just done a fantastic job of creating a culture there. And it just shows trust the process. Let the players develop within, right? They went and got Bam on a cheap deal from Toronto. Jimmy Butler was on the outs with a lot of people that were, he had a tough time in Minnesota and, Chicago, like it just nothing fit. So they got him cheap. They got an opportunity to get him, but no other big superstars. The Nuggets have drafted all these guys outside of maybe Aaron Gordon and like Bruce Bowen, or Bruce Brown. Like they haven't really chased a lot of big superstars. Trust the process, let these guys develop and create your culture, and look what happens if you just slow play it. It just, it helps me to believe a little bit more into what maybe, Zach Kline and these guys are doing. Maybe we can trust that process a little bit more.
Yeah. Heat culture is, like Chris Vernon tweeted out the other day, for Heat culture, this is their Mona Lisa. Mm-hmm. I mean, they started in this game, in Game 7 against Boston, they started Jimmy Butler, Cody Martin, Bam, Gabe Vincent, Max Strus. I know 2 of those were undrafted in Vincent and Strus. I'm not sure if Cody Martin was drafted by Charlotte or not. And then they got Jimmy. They traded for Jimmy. They drafted Bam.
Bam was drafted there. You're absolutely right.
And then Duncan Robinson, undrafted. Haywood Highsmith, undrafted. And Kyle Lowry. Those are the only other 3 players that played in that game. This is the greatest culture in basketball and maybe in professional sports right now. Mm-hmm. Pat Riley has been an executive, a coach, or a player in 19 NBA finals.
That's incredible.
The NBA is celebrating their 75th season this year. He's
Mhm.
been to 19 finals. That is, do some quick math, 19 divided by 75. That is 25% of all finals
That's
Pat
wild.
Riley has been involved in.
That's wild, man. What a stat.
I heard a story the other day talking about heat culture. You know, Pat Riley, he is known for, I don't want to make this sound wrong, but he's you've got to work. You've got to do your part. Everybody do your part.
do your
And
job.
one of the ways that he tests this is he has his players, you know, you have to show up to camp in shape. You're going to be in the best shape of your life when you're playing for Miami Heat. And Chris Wallace, before he got to the Grizzlies, was in the front office for the Miami Heat. And Chris Wallace, if you ever looked at Chris Wallace, he's a tubby guy, tall, bigger guy.
Yeah.
Pat Riley went into his office and said, I make our players and everybody involved in our organization work out because it shows discipline, you know, that you care about your body. You know, it's important to this team and this culture that everybody, you know, takes care of themselves. So he said, you get out there, you lose some weight, you get in shape, and I'll buy all your suits. And Chris Wallace said, that's the best shape I've ever been in my life. And I had a whole bunch of free suits.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, Pat Riley is that dude that you want to play for. Just knows what he's doing. Points that team in the right direction. Caleb Martin was drafted by the Hornets and released. His brother Cody is still there. His twin brother Cody is still there. But just a bunch of guys that just want to play basketball hard, and are winning basketball games. And it's fun to watch. It's cool to see. You kind of hate the narrative, like you said, that they didn't take the regular season very serious.
It's true, though.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. They turned it on at the right time. They got to the play-in. They even lost the first play-in game. Like, that one didn't matter. And then won the second one, played their way through the playoffs, beating the Bucks, the Knicks, like some really good basketball teams on their way
Bucks,
in.
The Knicks, and the Celtics. That's the 1, the 2, and the 5 seed.
Yeah. And so like it's just an incredible run and testament to that team and that culture. And I think it'll be a fun finals. I don't see the Nuggets blowing them out in these games. I just think they have too much firepower.
I don't think it's possible to blow out Miami. They play too hard and together to blow them out. But it'll be fun to see. The finals start tomorrow night at 7:30, and it's must-see TV. I will be in my first night of vacation, and I'm going to risk a lot of scorn from my wife by keeping up with it, but I'll have to.
Yeah, I'll be parked on my couch watching it tomorrow night. And then
we're sports media now. I've got to do it.
That's it. We have to. We've got the credentials somewhere, I'm sure. But Drew, this is one of my favorite times of the year coming up as well. Starting Friday begins one of, if not the greatest championship experience, I was saying all of sports.
I agree. I think that regionals baseball, if you are a fan of the home team, the host team, is one of the most fun experiences in person to watch sports.
Absolutely.
Because it's it's like going to Hoover to watch the SEC tournament. You've got 3 or 4 games. You've got 2 games on Friday. You've got 3 games on Saturday, or 3 or 4 games on Saturday. I mean, you're playing nonstop. You go buy a ticket book, get your lawn chair, and watch all of them. It's great. You need sunscreen, but it's great.
Yeah, there is a really good chance that I'm going to go up to Conway and watch CCU. They are hosting a super regional here in Conway, Coastal Carolina University, who are actually a very good baseball team, 39-19 this year. Have a really good shot at being a team going to Omaha. I'm going to watch that regional, and it's just so much fun. I was there in 2007 when I was at Mississippi State. We hosted we were playing against Clemson. We worked our way into the supers, beat Clemson to go on a team that should not have been in the College World Series, one of our worst baseball teams, but beat Florida State, beat Clemson, worked our way in. Just an incredible experience. It's so much fun. And then it leads to the College World Series, where our 2 teams have had success the last 2 times we were there, but just creates just a great championship atmosphere.
Right. So the top 16 seeds in the NCAA baseball regionals, the top 16 seeds are the host sides for the regionals. Wake Forest is your 1 seed, to no surprise. Florida got the 2 seed, Arkansas the 3 seed, Clemson and then LSU at the 5, SEC champions Vanderbilt at 6, Virginia, and then Stanford, Miami. The U is at 9. Like you say, Coastal Carolina out of a no-name division in Conway, South Carolina is
Sun
the
Belt,
10th.
baby. Fun Belt.
The Fun Belt is the 10th overall seed. Oklahoma State is the 11. Kentucky is the 12 seed. Auburn, and then the Fighting Larry Birds of Indiana State at 14.
And Terre Haute.
And South Carolina at 15, and Alabama at 16. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 SEC schools out of the top 16, which is not really even a surprise.
Especially after we talked about a couple weeks ago, our record against the field, the SEC dominates college baseball year in and year out, and so you should not be surprised that half of the regional sites are in SEC stadiums.
Right. And so I know that you want to get in. You've created a bracket here that you've sent to me. And so we're going to go through Rusty's bracket, which will more than likely, if not completely,
be wrong.
Certainly be wrong. What's always, and from two fans of teams here that are frequently in the regionals, we know how this works. When you're hosting a regional, the first thing you look at is who you're paired up against in the bracket for super regionals.
Yep.
And so that's how you look at your own pool. But honestly, if you're hosting, especially if you are a national seed, which is the top 8, which guarantees you home field in the supers, if you're a top 8 seed, you're looking to see who you're matched up with. And so, Rusty, go through your bracket.
Some really good matchups.
Real quick, I wanted to get to a couple of things. So first off, I know you've got the story for us. The Kentucky Wildcats are hosting a regional for the first time in their new ballpark, and they are not equipped to host this type of event. Tell us about it, Rusty.
So they had it's a little bit of a snafu. So it's the same weekend of a major country music festival that's happening there. And so there are no hotels available within an hour of Lexington, Kentucky. So West Virginia, who I think is a sneaky good baseball team, they're the 2 seed in that regional. West Virginia is a 2, Indiana's a 3, Ball State is the 4, are going to be staying in University of Kentucky dorm rooms. They sent out a guide about on-campus housing. They're charging each team $185 a room to stay in the dorms. And so you're going to have a suite of, if you do, it's $92.50 per night with a shared bathroom per room. And so they're going to have to stay in university housing because they don't have any hotels available. Lexington's not a massive town. Paired that with a country music festival leads to no rooms. No room at the inn.
Well, 2 things. First, that this is a surprise that the baseball team is good, because this would never happen in Oxford or Starkville, where they would plan a outdoor concert, a festival on regionals weekend. It just wouldn't happen. Not. Secondly, it sucks for the fans and for the players too, because when they set up these regionals, they try to keep the teams in the region.
It's called a regional.
So you've got Ball State, which is in Ohio, right? Or Indiana. Then you've got Indiana and West Virginia, which are all in driving distance.
It's in Muncie, Indiana.
In Indiana. So you've got teams, West Virginia is the furthest away, but they're the 2 seed, so they've got the most reason to travel.
That's not even that. I mean, really not even that far to Morgantown, theoretically.
Right. And so it just really sucks for the fans coming in, because it's such a special experience to go to an SEC town, to a regional. And like I said, for all the reasons that we've said before, it's just a lot of fun and something you really want to be a part of. And to have to stay in the dorms is just a real kick to the stomach.
That's a bummer, man. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about real quick is, have you seen the comments from Kansas State head ball coach Pete Hughes about them being left out?
I haven't. I saw where he made comments, but if you've got the quotes, I'd like to hear them.
It's a decently long quote, so hang with me for a second. It's not too bad, but he said, the Division I baseball committee and the system failed Kansas State, our program, and our seniors. It was obvious that the committee overemphasized the RPI, a flawed metric. The regional disparities of the RPI are glaring and were still used as a tool to form, shape, and make decisions. The most important criteria that has zero gray area. Zero is bold and in quotes, emphasize. Zero gray area is head-to-head competition. It's definitive. Someone wins, someone loses. We were left out in place of two teams that we finished ahead of in overall conference play, and also two teams that we beat head-to-head. Why play the games if the records are not valued? When did we stop rewarding winning? It's inexplicable and disappointing. Our players and community deserve better. And that's a stab to a future SEC program in University of Oklahoma. And I think the other one was also future SEC Texas Longhorns.
Yeah, so if you look at, and they do use the RPI, and you can have your beef with the RPI if you would like to. I think it is a flawed metric, and that's the reason why in basketball they developed the net rating, then kind of went away from the RPI. But what basically, for all of you that are not sure what the RPI is, basically it looks at the opponents you've lost to record. So if you lost to say Oklahoma, but Oklahoma went and lost to, say, Northwest Oklahoma State Community College, then the fact that Oklahoma lost to them reflects poorly on you. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yep. And
so I'll hear his argument based on RPI, but what I think happened, because Ole Miss's RPI wasn't great last year, but I've got the RPIs pulled up here. The teams above Kansas State here in RPI, they finished 55th in RPI.
That's not great.
They only take 48 teams.
Yeah.
So above Kansas State, Notre Dame, USC, Arizona State, Mississippi State had the 51st RPI. Missouri, who was abysmal in the SEC with a 30-24 record, above them. UC Irvine, Virginia Tech, Louisiana Lafayette, Kent State. Their RPI hurt them. I mean,
big time.
You can say I don't believe in the RPI, and that's his belief, and maybe there's some merit to that, but that's what they use. It's what they've used forever to break ties, basically.
Well, it's the reason that Auburn is hosting over Southern Miss, even though, and that's a big John Cohen point. He's now he's the AD at Auburn and got them hosting over Southern Miss, and I think Southern Miss going to go down there and whip their tail because they're angry, but.
And Southern Miss with a 21 RPI, Auburn 19. If you're going to say that anybody should have hosted over Auburn, the team with the 13th RPI, the Campbell Camels.
Oh, huge miss, man.
Was a snub.
And they came out and they said it was about like capacity too, because they have a small stadium, but they had volunteered to move it to the minor league stadium there in Fayetteville, host it there.
I get that, but then Indiana State's, they were the 9th RPI, so it was a little bit better, but they don't have the capacity.
Mm-mm.
So
it felt like
it's not a perfect system.
No, and it felt very much good old boy by like under the table kind of dealing this year to get some of those powerhouses where they should be, when you should have give Campbell a shot to host. Campbell's a sneaky good team, and they can pitch, which is going to help them a lot in this postseason.
If you look at what happened to Ole Miss last year, they benefited from name recognition. They benefited from John Cohen being the athletic director at the time at Mississippi State and former baseball coach at Mississippi State, vouching for Mike Bianco. He knows that program as well as anybody that is not in the Ole Miss dugout, and because of name recognition. But the difference is the teams that got left out were teams like Grand Canyon and NC State. They weren't names. Kansas State isn't a name either, but when you're comparing it to teams like Indiana State, and then John Cohen, the now athletic director at Auburn, got his team in. That's where he drew the line, I'm sure.
Exactly. So, so that kind of sets the stage for walking into regionals this weekend. We can kind of go through the different regionals, and if you got any teams that stand out, but we kind of walk through who I predict, and you can kind of tell me where I'm wrong. I'm sure there'll be plenty of those. But we'll start with the number 1 overall seed. That is the Wake Forest Demon Deacons of the ACC. Got a decent draw. Maryland's a pretty good baseball team, but George Mason and Northeastern, I think Wake Forest, the number 1 overall seed, 47-10 record, phenomenal rotation, wins their home regional.
Yeah, and these things, weird things happen in regionals. You know, as an Ole Miss fan, we've never made the College World Series in which we hosted a super regional. Last year we did not even host our own regional. We went as a 3 seed and ended up winning it all. So weird things happen. Like you said in a previous podcast, you don't want to be the number one overall seed. History tells you that.
Last team to win was the 2001 Miami Hurricanes.
Right. And so I don't think that they're going to really struggle. I mean, I saw Maryland. They've got an ace on Friday night. Luckily, the way that this goes, Maryland will have the decision to make. Do you throw your ace in game one against Northeastern, or do you wait and hope you win despite throwing your number two guy and then save your number one guy for a winner's bracket matchup against probably Wake Forest? But yeah, I don't think anybody. Wake Forest is good. Ole Miss went 8-1 against the Big Ten this year, Big Ten champions out of the SEC, and so yeah, I think Wake Forest wins it.
Yeah, walking away, and they are paired with the 16 overall seed, the Alabama Crimson Tide, hosted in Tuscaloosa, which has been a cool story after firing their head coach. Now they're hosting a regional, and at one point in the season, they weren't even in the conversation. But they got Boston College, who's a good baseball team, Troy, who typically is good, and then Nichols from Louisiana. I think Alabama gets the joy of winning their own regional and facing Wake Forest in the Supers.
Yeah, Bama's going to end up messing around and hiring their interim, even though he may or may not be the best guy for the job. But yeah, this regional for me doesn't seem very challenging for Alabama, which is the 16th seed in the regional. I mean, in the regional, so they were the last team picked to host. Alabama's RPI is 11, and Boston College, the number 2, is 18, so they're pretty close there. But I tend to always side with the SEC schools because I see them play all the time, and I know any conference that gets 8 hosts is legit. And
Alabama's just scrappy. They're a decent baseball team. They're coming together. They believe in this interim head coach. It's Matt Luke, right? He's got them fired up, heading the right direction. I think that Alabama wins.
Yeah. Okay. So the next regional you've got the 1 seed Miami in the Coral Gables regional. The defending champion Ole Miss Rebels decide to sit out this regional this year. And Miami will play Maine. Your guys from up northeast,
Black Bears. That's it.
The Maine Black Bears in the first round, and then Louisiana. I will not Louisiana. Don't call me Louisiana Lafayette. Raging Cajuns play Texas. Texas being the 2 seed in that regional. Texas with an RPI of 28 this year, very down for them. And Miami's RPI is 12. So you've got the U coming out of here alive. I have a problem picking a home team to lose a regional 2 years in a row. And the 3 seed Louisiana, I don't think they're going to be Ole Miss of last year.
No.
So
I think they could upset Texas, but I don't know that they could upset Miami. Fun fact, my first ever recruiting trip that I ever went on was to the Mississippi State Maine game. That Maine won.
Was Maine recruiting you?
No, Mississippi State, and Maine won 9-7 in 2004. It was ugly, man. It's like,
I remember that game. That was great. That was the Croom years, right?
Yeah, that was ugly.
Yeah. So,
Coach Croom walks in the M Club and he goes, "Sorry about that." Yeah. Anyway.
So, yeah, I could see Texas getting hot, being that Cinderella team. You know, you look at underseeded teams that's got talent that maybe just hadn't figured it out. You know, Texas has got talent. The players are there. Yeah. And so, you know, you look at that, but yeah, you've got the U. I won't argue with you. I didn't fill out a bracket, so I'm just going to give commentary and not pick anything. So
I'm putting my neck out there for our listeners. Y'all listen, y'all know that I am going for it. I'm probably going to be wrong, much like my college football picks, but we're in this thing.
Yeah. So in the next one, another regional being hosted in Palo Alto, the Stanford Cardinal. The 2 seed in that regional is SEC Texas A&M, 3 seed Cal State Fullerton, a traditional power, even though they haven't been great as of late.
In the early 2000s, they were Omaha mainstay.
Right. So you've got Stanford coming out of this regional. You're going very chalk so far. Mm-hmm. So you've got Stanford beating San Jose State and whoever comes out between Texas A&M and Fullerton. I think that A&M is dangerous this year.
Yeah.
They've got that swag late. Baseball is all about hitting your peak at the right time. Not to keep bringing it up because I'm humble, but Ole Miss got hot at the right time last year, and even as a state fan, you admit that's what helps more than anything is being hot at the right time in baseball.
Absolutely. Goes a long
And
way.
A&M went on a run in Hoover, which basically that run in Hoover to the title game sealed them as a 2 seed. They were kind of bubblish. They finished 36-25. Kind of what Ole Miss was last year. You were kind of bubblish, but that deep run in Hoover got them up to the 2 seed. And so, if there's an upset that I've seen so far, it's Stanford. You remember Stanford went into Omaha last year as the highest seed in our side of the bracket, and went 0-2 in Omaha.
Right.
Lost to Arkansas and then to Auburn in 2 games in Omaha.
Yeah, absolutely. They that was one I went back and forth about because the Aggies are hot. They're playing good baseball right now. They are trending in the right direction. And so that was a tough one for me. I went with the home team because it's a long way out to Palo Alto. Stanford is traditionally a team like Arkansas that makes it to a super, if not Omaha, and then fizzles out. So I went with the Stanford Cardinal there.
Yeah. So Baton Rouge is the next host site that we're going to go for.
Oh, dude, we've got an epic matchup, or potential of an epic of 2 college baseball powerhouses here.
Ooh, you talking about Tulane?
The 1940.
We'll get to it. Yeah. So LSU is paired up. We know we like to keep these local. The NCAA likes to keep these local. So you've got LSU, Tulane, located in New Orleans, Sam Houston State from East Texas, and Oregon State. So Oregon State drawing the 2 seed against LSU. Tulane, the best story so far, made a run in the American tournament. They had no shot of being in the tournament less a conference title win. They went and knocked out ECU in the American Conference Tournament Championship game to enter as the 4 seed in this bracket with a record of 19-40. It's the greatest story in baseball right now. However, it's going to end very poorly for them in that first game. When I'm sure LSU will probably
won't throw Paul Skeens.
Yeah, they'll probably hold Paul Skeens for a matchup against Oregon State. But what are your thoughts on this? You called Oregon State a powerhouse. So
it's cool, man. LSU is a perennial Omaha mainstay. They've won a ton of national championships, followed closely by the Oregon State Beavers, who always seem to be there. They're that team that's always good. They put out Mississippi State in 2007. They've been there a ton. They've got a great baseball facility. I went there on a trip when I was in college. It was a great experience. Beautiful ballpark in a valley up there in Corvallis.
Wait, you went where?
To Corvallis, to Oregon State.
You took a trip to Oregon State?
Yeah, I went with the FCA. Went up there and did a mission trip.
I thought you were talking about recruiting. Shoot.
No. This was when I was in college. We went up there to help do some work and plan an FCA.
You weren't Division One good.
Yeah. Anyway,
I remember my dad used to hold me up and say, "That boy right there, that's a ball player."
Yeah, back in the ancient times. Yeah. But moving right along, Oregon State, perennial powerhouse out of the Pac-12. It's one of those cool historical matchups. Oregon State is not as good as they usually are. They're still a very sneaky good baseball team, but LSU Oregon State will be a great matchup, if nothing else for the history. But I did stay chalk here, and so far all 1 seeds winning. I picked LSU to come out of this one because they're one of the best teams on paper in baseball. Injuries and not playing up to par and getting swept by your Mississippi State Bulldogs on the last weekend of the season. It just leads to, I don't know, looking at them on paper, they should be one of the final 4 teams, if not final 2 teams in Omaha. This was a fairly easy pick for me.
Yeah, and Oregon State last year, which got put out in the Super Regionals by Auburn. It's the only time in my life I've cheered for Auburn because Oregon State had a bona fide ace that everybody was scared of. But Auburn outlasted them in 3 games last year because that would have been Auburn was Ole Miss's first opponent in Omaha, and so we were really rooting for Auburn instead of Oregon State. So they choked that time. Yeah, Oregon State, most famously known for the best executed foul ball of all time
Yep.
in 2019, just out of the reach of the Arkansas second baseman. But yeah, LSU's just got star power from top to bottom. Like Tommy Smokes, Cade Beloso, Paul Skeens, you the center fielder, Dylan Cruz. Yeah, they're
They're
it would
loaded.
be one of the biggest upsets of all time if they don't get out of their own regional.
Yeah, I mean it's been said multiple times. Paul Skeens is pitching in the wrong league. He should be in the American or the National right now. I mean, guys are just a ready-made pro, and that's a pretty easy pick. But they are paired in the Lexington regional with my first upset.
Yeah. So, is this pulling at your heartstrings?
No, I mean, I spent some time in West Virginia. I like it up there, but they're a good baseball team. They're deep. They hit the ball well. They got some good pitching. They played well in the Big 12 this year. And I'm a big believer in Kentucky, man. Like they're good. I projected them to finish third in the East, and they play good baseball. I just don't know that they have the tools to be a deep team in the College World Series this year.
Yeah, so they are matched up. Auburn is matched up with Penn out of the Ivy League.
Oh, skipped it. We're talking about Kentucky, West Virginia.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Indiana and Ball State.
Yeah, so I'll save that then. But yeah, so West Virginia is the Kentucky. What did I say? Kentucky was the RPI.
Overall
the number 2 RPI team in the country. Surprise, surprise. You wouldn't have believed that. Mm-hmm. West Virginia is the 24th in RPI. Mm-hmm. And then Penn and Indiana and Ball State. What's Indiana? Indiana's, that's where.
They're 30th. Kyle Schwarber, baby.
Yeah, and that's where your boy came from. Your ball coach at Mississippi State.
Oh yeah, Chris Lemonis
came from Indiana.
Yep, Chris Lemonis there. The forever Cub legend, and Kyle Schwarber was from Indiana. Was a catcher on that team that made it to Omaha.
Yeah, so to me, it seems like the only competition would probably be from Kentucky and West Virginia. Not really buying either of the 3 or 4 seeds, so I have no problem with you picking West Virginia. They're going to be pissed off because all their parents are staying in dorm rooms.
Yeah, exactly.
So
now the regional you were so eager to get to.
Yeah, so this one, if the state of Mississippi is going to go for a 3-peat, it's got to be Southern Miss. Yeah. And Southern Miss is paired up as the 2 seed in the Auburn, Alabama regional. Auburn, the 1 seed, then you got Penn and Samford, rather.
Out of Birmingham.
The Stanford of Alabama.
Yeah. Which ain't saying much.
Yeah. But, I mean, Samford probably deserves to get some credit here. Because if nothing else, they put a bunch of really good players in the transfer portal every year. Yeah, Auburn, listen, I think they're fine. I think that, they finished at 34-21. They, let's see, where did they end up in the RPI? Rusty, do you know?
Who's that?
Auburn.
Auburn is their top 19th.
19th in the RPI. They're not a team that really stands out and it's the same story they had last year and they made the College World Series, but they don't do anything great, but they do a lot of things really well. And maybe that's enough.
Great head coach. Butch Thompson always has those guys ready. He gets those guys believing, pointing in the right direction. You talk about Samford putting people in the transfer portal, though. Colton Ledbetter, one of the big leaders from Mississippi State this year, transferred from Samford, former SoCon Player of the Year. Auburn's good, but they're very beatable. They got a lot of flaws. Southern Miss is pissed that they're not hosting. There's been a lot of talk about that. I think Southern's got some good pitching. Not a big fan of the Mustard Buzzards out of Hattiesburg, but I think they can upset Auburn and win that regional. And I don't know that it's necessarily that much of an upset. Southern Miss is a very good baseball team.
Yeah, listen, I don't root for Southern Miss for the same reason I don't root. I mean, they hate Ole Miss. I don't care for them too much. However, I believe I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott Berry's going to retire after this year. Scott Berry, who's just a class act, a
Yeah.
great coach who
Been
built
there
that
forever.
program. He is one of those guys that it's fun to root for guys like Scott Berry. And so, yeah, I'm rooting for Southern Miss. I love it when SEC teams lose. And so we'll see what happens. I'm rooting for Southern Miss. If Southern Miss does come out of it, or Auburn or Samford or Penn, they will match up with the Clemson South Carolina regional,
Yeah.
which consists of a 2 seed, the unequivocal regular season champs of 2022, the Tennessee Volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
as well as Lipscomb and Charlotte.
Clemson is a team that I'm keeping an eye on. They are a good baseball team. They're deep. They hit the ball well. They've got solid pitching. They're the 4th overall seed, 6th in the RPI. They play really good baseball, and they're a team that I think has got a really good shot at being one of those final few teams in Omaha. Sorry, Clemson fans, Lauren and Stacy, that's a kiss of death. I fully recognize that. But I think Clemson wins this regional. It's a chalk pick. They're the number 1 overall seed in that regional, in their home regional. But I don't know. I like Clemson, man. I think they got a real shot.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at that, I'm not really ever been a big believer in Clemson. They've had teams that are really good before. I'm going to take Tennessee there.
Ooh.
Just because I think Tennessee's got more players. Tennessee's fine. Tennessee's good. Tennessee's been there. I mean, you hate them for it, but they've got that swagger about them. And I just don't buy Clemson. I don't buy the ACC. You know, their 2 best teams were Wake Forest and Clemson, and
Florida
then
State for the first time in 25 years.
So you've got
Didn't
Wake
make
Forest, Clemson, and then
Virginia.
Virginia and Miami. So maybe I'm being a little harsh there. Those are all have RPIs in the top 12. So maybe I'm being a little harsh, but Tennessee's shown it to me more recently than Clemson has. They're a year removed from going what? They go 25-5 in the SEC last year.
Just something stupid.
Yeah. So, all right, let's go to the other side of the bracket. So, all of the teams that we've mentioned so far are, or do you want to do second round, go all the way to the College World Series here, or let's regroup after?
We'll regroup and where we're at. We'll go ahead and keep trucking along through the regionals.
So these teams will be on the opposite side of the bracket when they make it to Omaha. It starts off with the number 1 seed, the number 2 overall seed, the Florida Gators. Have a pretty easy 2 seed in UConn. I just don't buy it. This is 2 years in a row they've been in the regional, and they are solid. But the tricky part
last year, yeah.
The tricky part is their 3 seed, which is a perennial powerhouse and an Omaha mainstay in Texas Tech, and then you've got Florida A&M, which is participation.
UConn at the 2 seeds got a 22 RPI. Definitely kind of an overvalued team there. I agree. I mean, Texas Tech, they're not the Texas Tech of old. They're a good baseball team. I think Florida's got a pretty easy path, not only out of the regionals, but even out of the super regional.
Yeah. And so that's kind of how it happens. You know, if you're the top dog overall, you're going to get the easiest matchup. So Texas Tech, just doing a quick deep dive on them real quick if my computer will load up quick enough. They finished 39-21 overall, which is respectable, you know. In the Big 12, I'm trying to find their record here. We may just have to hold that spot there for a second, as my computer's being a little slow. But Texas Tech is a perennial powerhouse. I remember
they went 12-12 in the Big 12 this year.
They only played 24 games in the Big 12. I guess there's only 10 teams, so. Okay. Well, that's not very encouraging, but I guess that's one of the teams that Kansas State was griping about.
It was Texas Tech and Oklahoma. They had they only had 2 players on the All Big 12 team this year. They're not the Texas Tech of old.
Yeah. So Yeah, that's the team to watch. You're looking at a 3 seed. Ole Miss was a 3 seed last year with name recognition. Maybe it's Texas Tech, but I saw that Florida team play in person twice this year. They're really good, really
Yeah.
really good. So they'll match up with South Carolina, which is a potential SEC's matchup in the Super Regionals. Teams that are very familiar with each other. The 2 seed in that regional is the team that we thought kind of got snubbed for a host side, the Campbell Camels, the best paired alliteration name of all time, the
Yeah.
Campbell Camels. The 3 seed, the NC State Wolfpack, who have been really good the last few years.
Hmm.
Just imagine if they'd have kept Tommy White, what that record would have been.
Yeah.
And Central Connecticut State, which is they're happy to be here.
Yeah, exactly. And I picked the Campbell Fighting Camels out of Fayetteville, North Carolina to come out of this. They're a good baseball team. They're going to be playing with a chip on their shoulder. A, because they're a smaller school. B, because they got snubbed out of a host by our former AD, John Cohen, or at least he's taking all the heat for it. But I think Campbell comes out of this and faces the Florida Gators in the Supers.
Yeah, so South Carolina being the host team, South Carolina had an RPI of 8, and Campbell, as we said earlier, had an RPI of 13. NC State, for that matter, had an RPI of 23. So I think hands down, this is the toughest regional
Yeah,
so
that we've seen
far.
so far. Yeah.
Which I mean, if you look at South Carolina was the 15th overall seed, it kind of comes with the territory. If you're gonna barely make it into the host site, make the competition a little stiffer, and so they gave the hardest 2 seed to the arguably the least favorite 1 seed, and they did that, I'm sure, because of regionality. You've got South Carolina, NC State, and Camel, all in the 2 Carolinas. So
Yeah.
compare that just real quick, because I'm curious. Compare that with Alabama, who was the 16 seed. They got Nichols, Troy, and Boston College. You would have much rather been the 16 seed.
Yeah, this year.
Yeah. So, next you've got your boys in Conway, South Carolina, the Chanticleers, Coastal Carolina as the host site. The 2 seed there is Duke. The 3 seed is UNC Wilmington. And the 4th seed is your nephew Ryder.
Spelled a little different. They're from New Jersey and not Mickey, Tennessee. But
Okay.
yeah. But yeah, Shant's up. CCU pulls out the win. The Chanticleers are playing good baseball. Deeper this year. They got hotter and better as the season went on. It's a great ballpark. Like I said, I may make my way up there on Saturday. It's a great place to go watch baseball. It's a cool venue. Coastal's got a really nice campus. And I think they're going to be a wonderful host for all their teams from Carolina, plus Ryder from New Jersey. And they're going to win. I think they'll be facing Florida in the Supers.
And so Coastal Carolina's 23-10 this year at home. They do play in a very weak conference in which they dominate, but it's still baseball's funny, and you still got to win the games.
Yep.
So,
and I think I said Florida the Supers. I kind of, a little spoiler alert, I have them going a little bit further because I'm not convinced, much like you, and I may be dead wrong on this, about their super compadres over there in the Virginia Cavaliers.
Yeah, so that takes us to the next one. You've got Virginia. The Cavaliers is the 1 seed at 45-12. They are the number 7 overall seed in the
10th
tournament.
In the RPI.
Yeah, they have a tough number 2 in East Carolina, perennial super regional team that hasn't made it to the big dance yet. 3 seed Oklahoma Sooners, who most famously got beat by Ole Miss in the College World Series Championship Series, swept, beat the brakes off of them. They should have just retired the whole program right now. The wheels fell off of that wagon, just as we've all seen on the football field that one time.
Boomer Sooner.
Yeah. And then the 4 seed is our nation's finest. Happy Memorial Day to everybody who has loved ones that play for Army West Point.
They made sure to distinguish that it is Army West Point. It's cool to see one of our service teams be there, so I'm gonna root for them to win maybe 1 or 2 games, but I don't know that they have the dog in them to come out of Charlottesville with the win there.
No, if they were fighting a different battle, I'd pick them, but not in baseball.
Yeah, all day.
What I'm rooting for, a former Ole Miss assistant, coaches for East Carolina, and he's really been the guy that spurned this whole revival there. At where are they Greenville?
Greenville,
Greenville.
North Carolina, Greensboro.
I think it's Greenville, South Carolina, right?
They're in North Carolina.
Okay. Anyways, um, my man there at East Carolina, Cliff Godwin, has
Greenville, North
really
Carolina.
okay, North Carolina,
Mhm.
has really brought a revival there. He was the Ole Miss hitting coach for a long time. Uh, I really root for him. Mike Bianco paid him a big favor last year and tried to schedule them in non-conference series in Oxford to get their RPI up. And so Cliff Godwin's also one of the main coaches that's always in talks for big jobs. And so if he could make it to the Omaha one time, man, it would really just cement his legacy there. He was a former East Carolina player, and so he really loves that town, that university, and he wants to do it at East Carolina before he moves. And so I'm really rooting for East Carolina there. I don't know much about Virginia, if I'm being honest with you, other than they're just a big name in college baseball. But what I'm rooting for is East Carolina.
Yeah, they've got the 7th RPI. They're 32-4 at home. They're a good baseball team. They're deep. They had a good showing in the ACC this year. East Carolina is a 26 RPI, 12-9 on the road. So it's tough to upset some of these teams at home. Again, ECU is a feel good story. They got a ton of swagger, but I don't know if they can upset Virginia.
They've got the jungle out in the left field
Mm-hmm.
With all their students. I really root for East Carolina here. I hope that's one team I'm absolutely cheering for in this tournament. I really want them to do good. Cliff has got them to host the last 2 years. They're a 2 seed this year. I'm really pulling for East Carolina. And the next matchup we've got here is the 1 seed, the 6th overall seed out of the SEC East, Vanderbilt Commodores. 2 seed in that regional is Oregon, followed by Xavier in Eastern Illinois. I don't see how Vandy has any trouble in this regional.
Very easy regional. Won't spend a lot of time there. Vandy boys advance to face the winner of the Oklahoma State, the Stillwater regional.
Yeah, and that includes DBU, and that is not LSU. That is Dallas Baptist University out of Dallas, Texas. Washington Huskies, and Bob Roberts, Oral Roberts, the 4 seed there.
Yeah. Dallas Baptist is a good mid-major program. They were in the super regional last year in Columbia. 2 years ago, they were a very good Missouri Valley Conference team. Their RPI, I think they're pretty high.
Oh, they were really high. They were, I got it pulled up here. Dallas Baptist was 16th
RPI. They're in an overall week. I'm not a huge believer in Oklahoma State, who is 17th in the RPI, 1 spot behind Dallas Baptist. For all you RPI junkies out there looking at you, baseball committee. I think Dallas Baptist comes out of this, man. They're good. They're a fun story. There's always that one mid-major. It's usually Cal State Fullerton. It's been Dallas Baptist in the past. It's been Rice. There's these different teams that find a way to win in this time of the year. Give me Dallas Baptist. DBU advances to play Vanderbilt.
Yeah, can you tell me the famous DBU alum?
I know nothing about them other than seeing their stats and researching for tonight.
Oh, really? So they've actually got a storied history with Major League Baseball players.
Yeah, they've had a lot of
prospects. Ryan Goins.
Yeah.
Former St. Louis Cardinal Jason LaRue.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Cliff Pennington used to pitch for the Oakland Athletics, and most famously, Thor himself, Noah Syndergaard,
that's right.
College baseball
about that
at Dallas Baptist University.
That Dan Hefner is their head coach. He had him in a regional in 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and then 21 actually made a super regional.
Yep. So I always look at Washington here. So Washington came and played a regional in Oxford that I was in attendance for, and they were the 2 seed in the Oxford Regional. And after they got put out, after every game, the fans would go over into right field, which is the student section, and they just joined us right in the party, and it got to the point to where they became such good pals with everybody out there that all of Ole Miss student section stuck around and cheered for them through the consolation. Because I don't believe, no, we did. We ended up playing them, but they didn't make it to the championship final. They got put out pretty quick. But yeah, they were a lot of fun
cool.
to be around. So, next we've got the Fighting Larry Birds. They ended up being the 14th overall seed, and they draw Iowa, Wright State, and North Carolina as a 3 seed. North Carolina 3 seed is tough.
That's tough. North Carolina with the 27th RPI. They're 9-8 on the road, 35-22 overall. They're better than their record shows, and they're an ACC team, which is, as we can see, they're one of the deeper conferences behind the SEC this year. But Indiana State's got a ninth overall RPI. I believe in them, man. They're doing the research for tonight. They seem like a good baseball team. Again, they're in the Missouri Valley Conference. Not a baseball powerhouse conference, but Dallas Baptist is right there. Dallas Baptist now CS Conference USA, a former Missouri Valley Conference team. Indiana State's got a shot, man.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Any team with a record of 42-15 hosting a regional, they've earned it. Maybe this year less than others when you think of teams like Camo and whatnot. But Indiana State with a 9th overall RPI, like you said. Iowa has an RPI of 32, and North Carolina, as a 3 seed, has a higher RPI at 27. Mm-hmm. That's a tough 2-3 matchup you're going to get in the winners bracket if you make it past Wright State, who perennially has a really good team for their level. They've not made that jump into actually competing for super regionals before, but they are a solid team historically. So,
and Iowa's only our second Big Ten team. Like, they're not from a baseball conference, so that 42-14 record might be a little skewed by how bad the Big Ten is at baseball.
Yeah, and I would probably just have to go North Carolina here, just because they're the name. They're the one that's been there before. They were in the Supers last year against Arkansas, and so you've got Iowa State, and then you've got them paired up in the Super to be played in Fayetteville against Arkansas. Arkansas draws TCU as a 2 seed, Arizona as a 3 seed, and Santa Clara as the 4 seed. What jumps out to me here, Arizona, Ole Miss has played them in the last 2 postseasons. Arizona made it to the College World Series in 21, and Ole Miss put them out in 22 as the 2 seed in Coral Gables. And TCU, who may be reeling just a tad by their own standards since Jim Schlossnagle went to Texas A&M. Mm-hmm. But for Arkansas to be the number 3 overall national seed to draw 2 Power 5 teams in their regional, I think you've got a reason to be mad if you're an Arkansas fan.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough, man, because Arizona, like you said, Arizona and TCU normally host regionals, if not supers, especially Arizona. That's a tough draw for Arkansas. I think they come out of it and continue to host into the super regionals, but if I'm like you, if I'm Arkansas, I'm a little bit upset by that draw, especially being, like you said, the 3rd overall seed. That's one of the tougher regionals that we've covered, and they're the 3rd overall seed.
But I tell you what, it couldn't happen to a better fan base.
Absolutely.
I couldn't be happier. So we've got our closest family friends are huge Razorback fans. They're from Little Rock. Shout out to the Millers in North Little Rock, Arkansas. That I'm sure they're not listening, but I tell them, and I have told them to their face, that they're obnoxious. My Uncle Scott, we call them Uncle and Aunt. My Uncle Scott and Aunt Lori, the parents, my dad's and mom's closest friends, are in Europe right now with my parents. And so nothing would make me happier than for them, while they're in Europe, to stay up, because currently it's probably, it is 8:35 local time. So it is about 3:30 in the morning their time. I would love for them to stay up every night at 3:30 to watch them lose in the regional to TCU and then Arizona. So couldn't happen to a better fan base.
Absolutely. So we'll roll real quick through our supers. First one being Wake Forest, Miami, and I think Miami's got it's a ACC matchup. Miami's got a good team, but Wake Forest,
and Bama.
Oh, sorry, super. Yes, sorry, got ahead of myself. Wake Forest and Alabama. I've got Wake Forest heading coming out of that. They're too good of a team. Number 1 overall seed. Wake Forest coming out of that.
Yeah, and then you've got Miami versus Stanford, and you've got the U coming out of that, and I can't disagree with that. LSU beating West Virginia, and Clemson beating
Country Roads. They're going to take them right back to Morgantown.
Yeah, and then you've got Southern Miss and Clemson, with Clemson winning at home in that regional. So on that side of the bracket, you've got Wake Forest, Miami, LSU, and Clemson, which is just about as chalk as it gets.
But you picked Tennessee there. So in this theoretical, we've got Southern Miss and Tennessee. Who would you have coming out?
Who do I want to win? I mean, I'd want Southern Miss there. No, Tennessee would beat Southern Miss.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's where Southern Miss falls apart. You know, they had one of their best seasons in school history last year, and Ole Miss swept them with a 0 ERA. You know, Ole Miss beat them 5-0, then 10-0 at Pete Taylor Park in Hattiesburg, and so and then they lost their 2 best pitchers. Or did they lose their ace? I know Hurston Waldrop went to Florida. That was their Saturday night.
I think they lost both of them. Yeah.
Barry is his last name. Josh Barry, Jacob Barry. I want to say it was Josh Barry. I want to say he may have come back, but regardless, they're not as good this year as they were last year. So yeah, I'd pick Tennessee over Southern Miss.
So that kind of rounds that out. So for me, it's Wake Forest, Miami, LSU, Clemson, and the same for you, except for UT instead of Clemson. So in the supers on the other side of the bracket, I've got Florida and Campbell. Fighting Camels run out of steam against an SEC powerhouse, and I think Florida wins that one fairly easily.
Right, me too.
Coastal Carolina and UVA. I think the upset there continues. I'm riding the Chants all the way to Omaha. I think they upset Virginia. Again, Virginia is the 7th overall seed. CCU is the 10th overall seed. I think CCU goes up there, gets a win, and faces Florida in Omaha.
Okay.
You had ECU in that. Do you think ECU could beat CCU to go play Florida in Omaha?
Yeah, sure. Of course I can.
Why not?
I mean, they're comparable. I mean, that'd be probably pretty evenly matched with CCU being the slight favorite.
Yeah, for sure. They played earlier this year, and I think they went 1-1 in Conway. So there you go. Vandy and Dallas Baptist rounding out the last side of our bracket. Vandy's the obvious choice there. They're a good baseball team. They're getting hot at the right time, which is stupid. They're a private school with all their dumb scholarships, and they're starting to win like they always do. Not salty at all.
And then you've got ISU, Illinois, Indiana State versus Arkansas. Sure, I know which way you're leaning on that one.
Yeah, I mean Arkansas. Arkansas always finds a way to get late in the tournament before they fizzle out. I think they do it again this year, but they don't do it till they get to Omaha, and they go down 0-1 to Vandy when they get there.
So the way you have it, and the way I have it, is different. So you've got Vandy and Arkansas playing in the first round of Omaha, which would be must-see TV.
Yeah.
I would, on the other side of the bracket, I'd have LSU and Tennessee as the first game in Omaha, which would be just great. I mean,
they give you 5 SEC teams in Omaha.
Yep. So that's where we're going to leave this for right now. Once the super regionals are set, we'll talk about individual matchups and who we think will make it to Omaha. Like Rusty said, this is a ton of fun. I love college baseball at this time of year. I love attending college baseball any time of the year, but this is a special time if you are a college baseball fan, because it's wall-to-wall action. You can't ask for more baseball. You know,
it starts Friday afternoon, goes all the way through Sunday, and it's just a wonderful time to veg out in front of the TV and watch baseball. If you're not a college baseball fan at this point, do yourself a favor and watch the regionals this weekend. It will make you a college baseball fan.
Right. You got anything else before we shut her down and I get to go on vacation?
I got one last baseball topic I want to talk about as we send it out. You know, Drew and I, we're both suckers. We've talked about on this podcast for anything Team USA. I don't care what it is. You put that USA Stars and Bars on a jersey, and I'm in. Right? All in. Did you see what our 12 and under baseball team did this past week?
I saw a clip, and I'm going to tell you something. What did we come back to win 29 to 26
It
or
was
something?
28-17 heading to the bottom of the sixth. They only play 6 innings in 12U baseball, and with just 3 outs left, Team USA scored 12 runs and won on a grand slam to take the win 29-28.
As a professional 8U softball coach, I would tell you that, to me, that tells me that whoever the United States 12U team was playing, they ran out of pitching. And when you run out of pitching when it comes to 12-year-olds, I mean, it's over. They gave up that grand slam to win it, and I guarantee you it was thrown underhand.
My favorite, I love when I see stuff on Twitter, I go to the comments and see what top comment. First one was, man, the under got nuked.
Oh, yeah. No doubt about that. Yeah, we finished off our 8U softball season last night. At least I did. They scheduled a makeup game for tomorrow night, and I'm not going to be there. Our best hitter, a girl by the name of Bailey, who I'm telling you hit absolute rockets all year. She's a lefty, and she barrels it up every time. I'm backing up, pitching it to her. She brought out a old composite softball bat.
Get out of here.
That was as hot as a dang firecracker. And she smoked one. My daughter, who is Chloe, God love her, she's not very fleet of foot, but she barrels up a softball. And when I say barrel it up, she's hitting them pretty sharp, but on the ground. I told her to use that composite bat, and she two-hopped the grass out there. And it lasted for about 3 innings until one of our girls named Kylie got up there and smoked the girl playing in the center, in the circle. You know, they do the circle in softball. She was playing the circle position, and she took, I know the exit velo was like 75 off this bat, took it square off the knee. And me and the umpire both same time said, "Get that bat out of here." I mean, it was better her than me.
Hey, speaking of softball, though, we got the Women's College World Series starting tomorrow night. Always must-see TV if you're a fan of softball. And even if you're not, it's just fun to watch. The girls, when they get to this point, I like the Women's College World Series.
I like it, too. It's fine, but you're being very liberal with must-see TV.
Well, I mean, I guess you're right. I'm trying to not get canceled here in 2023, but you got your perennial powerhouses there: Tennessee, Alabama, Oklahoma, Stanford, Florida State, and then Utah, the 15 seed, made the College World Series this year.
That's who put Ole Miss out.
Mm-hmm. I'll watch it. It'll be fun. It'll be something to watch this weekend as well. I'll keep up with it because they play early in the day. The baseball plays later in the day, so get to watch a little bit of both.
Yeah. So the last thing I'll end here, and egg on my face, I guess, because I'm talking college basketball a little bit. Ole Miss got 3 major commitments. One of them was Matthew Morrell coming back, decided not to try his hand at the NBA draft. He was the leading scorer last year. They also got a transfer from Auburn who committed, got in the transfer portal, said he was going to Ole Miss as long as he didn't stay into the draft. And so he did not go into the draft. He pulled his name out of the draft and will be enrolling at Ole Miss, which was a big get. His dad is actually going to be on the coaching staff at Ole Miss. He was on the coaching staff at Auburn, and so that definitely helped. And they just got a commit from last year's Cinderella, a guard named Jalen Murray from St. Peter's. So I couldn't tell you the first thing about him. This says the explosive point guard from the Bronx. So cool.
There you go.
So Chris Beard playing the transfer portal and playing it hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. Well, hey, listen, man, enjoy your vacation. It was a great time as always. You know where to find us at 2 Bucks Sports Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, same on Facebook. Look us up, give us a like, share, follow. Please, 5-star reviews, 4-star reviews, whatever. Give us a review. If we made you laugh, you enjoyed the show, that's how we get our name out there.
Hey, and Rusty, I enjoyed it. I will have a great time on vacation. And we'll okay, let me start that sentence over. And we will reunite on next Wednesday for another episode of the 2 Bucks My goodness.
It's a wrap.
I'm telling you, it's not even 9 o'clock here Central Standard Time, and I'm just marble mouthing this. I'm just trying to close the podcast out, and I can't get it out. We will regroup right here next Wednesday for episode number 36 of the Two Bucks Sports Podcast. Until then, check us out on social media. If you have any questions, please send them our way. Shout out to our good friend and my best cousin, Kirk, who spent the weekend in St. Louis watching the Cardinals go 1-1 against the Kansas City Royals in the Cross City rivalry there. So until then, we love you. We'll see you next week, and goodbye.
See you guys.